This is Omar Nashashibi from Washington, D.C. with some breaking news on the agreement between the United States and the European Union to suspend tariffs in the Boeing-Airbus aviation dispute, and also some progress in the Section 232 national security steel and aluminum tariffs that are also been applied to the European Union and the subsequent retaliatory tariffs imposed on U.S. exports. During the G7 meetings this week on Tuesday, June 15th, the United States and European Union agreed to suspend for 5 years the $11.5 billion of combined annual tariffs on goods imposed by the previous administration. While not unexpected by many of us in the trade community here in town, it does mark an important step in the beginning to de-escalate the tariff wars with our allies, particularly those in the European Union and the G7 member countries. The two parties originally suspended the tariffs for 4 months starting in March 2021 between the United States and European Union. The tariffs, though, will remain suspended for the 5 years as long as both sides uphold the terms of the agreement, including no longer providing direct subsidies for the development of all future passenger aircraft. In 2019, with a little bit of history, the WTO authorized the U.S. to levy tariffs of $7.5 billion against EU exports annually over European country support for Airbus over the previous decades. The EU then, in turn, won permission to hit back at the U.S. with tariffs on $4 billion worth of U.S. annual exports and for giving federal and state aid to Boeing over the years as well. The action is only a 5-year suspension. It does not completely lift the specter of tariff battles resuming if relations deteriorate or a new administration in Washington reverses course after the 2024 U.S. elections. Most of us do believe, however, that this is a legitimate suspension of the tariffs, and the motions are in place to resolve the 17-year-old legal conflict that has its origins all the way back to the 1980s between Boeing and Airbus through this aviation dispute. The U.S. and EU will work in the coming months to address which support for Boeing, Airbus, and their suppliers is permitted, and which is considered illegal and a prohibited subsidy. This is an important step for the U.S. and the EU and removes significant obstacle to cooperation on broader issues such as China and Russia. In fact, the rise of China and their expected emergence in the aviation industry by 2030 was really a driving factor here for the two Western aviation giants to push their leaders in governments across the ocean here to come to an agreement and put aside their own disagreements and focus on the new competitor coming onto the scene. The U.S. trade representatives imposed the Airbus tariffs on the European Union using the Section 301 trade process. And while they made progress with Europe on that front, many were let down by the lack of progress in removing the Section 232 25% tariffs on imported steel from Europe and the 10% aluminum tariffs that are still in place today. In a draft communique that was floating around D.C. last week, the sides had planned to lift tariffs on steel and aluminum from the EU by December 1st. However, in meetings this week, the U.S. did not mention the December 1st deadline, but most do believe the sides are working towards a solution by the end of this calendar year here in 2021. This may not mean the immediate lifting of all steel and aluminum tariffs, as some speculate the U.S. may request quotas or some limits on certain products that they're feeling coming into the U.S. at a disproportionate amount. This means for all those exporters from the United States who face retaliatory tariffs, they should not expect relief until there are more concrete steps taken to lift the steel and aluminum tariffs on Europe. A solution to the 232 tariffs will involve the EU and other trading partners working with the U.S. to address Chinese oversupply of metals that are undercutting markets across the world, in the opinion of Washington. We do expect more progress in the coming month, but full lifting of the steel and aluminum and retaliatory tariffs may not be as imminent as some may have hoped. We will keep you updated on the latest with tariffs and talks with Europe and our allies. In the interim, please contact your CLA representative for more information on develops coming from here in Washington, D.C.